Welcome to the Big Seance podcast. I'm Patrick Keller of BigSeance.com, and this is a place for an open discussion on all things paranormal, but specifically topics like ghosts and hauntings, paranormal research, spirit communication, psychics and mediums, and life after death. So basically, anything that pops up in my paranormal world. The candles are already lit, so you might as well come on in and join the seance.
Today's beautiful guest started creating YouTube videos in 2018 as a small vintage channel. Then in 2020, she bravely jumped into what she found was her true passion, Halloween. And it was then that Midge Munster was born. But there's a lot more to that, and it's a fascinating story that you'll hear in this episode. All of a sudden, Midge found herself being flown out to New Jersey for the opening of Spirit Halloween's flagship store. And now, Halloween is her full-time gig. When Midge tells others what she does, she always starts by describing herself as a haunted housewife. At a base level, her content is about home decor, vintage style, and how to add a dash of spooky to your everyday life. But more than that, it's about what can happen when you channel your energy into creating a life you love. Midge reminds you to keep it campy, kooky, glamorous, and spooky. You can find her everywhere at Midge Munster, and her website is midgemunster.com. Pour your tea, because this is such a great conversation. Y'all, I am here with Midge Munster, and I am so freaking pumped and excited because we are going to keep it campy, kooky, glamorous, and spooky. And, you know, now that I'm retired, I have some time on my hands. And even though I have known Midge Munster for a while because we have a circle of mutual friends in the Halloween nerd world, but it has only been in recent months that I've really dug in to the awesome nerdiness, the deliciousness that is Midge Munster. And after this episode, you are going to have to promise that you immediately go to Midge's YouTube or Instagram or Facebook or wherever you're going to go, because words just aren't going to do all of this justice, because there is so much deliciousness to see. And you need to start getting sucked into the world of Midge Munster. Midge, welcome to the Big Seance podcast.
Thank you, Patrick. I'm so excited to be here. You gave me a lot to live up to there.
No pressure.
No
pressure.
Yeah, I was just thinking, I guess has it been a couple years now that we've known each other's acquaintance, at least? I think it was 2021.
Well, it had to have been after the pandemic, because I know a lot of what you do really kicked in the pandemic, and I met you after you had already gotten started. So it had to have been around 2 years ago, I imagine.
That's so crazy. It feels both like this has been my life, and then also like it was yesterday. Yeah. You know, like I don't remember how it started. I don't know how to stop it.
Well, the whole world is a giant time warp since 2020. Like, who even knows what's happening?
Truly.
It might still be 2020. I don't know.
Oh, don't say that.
Midge is definitely someone who you need to follow for your Halloween juiciness. However, I happen to know, because I've talked to Midge, there are going to be plenty of crossovers for us to hit on here. Even though we focus quite a bit on Halloween here on the Big Seance podcast, but there are some paranormal things that we're going to talk about. But first, Midge, I want you to be able to, in your words, until people can go do their homework and go follow you and actually see for themselves, describe, I guess, visually your stunningly beautiful style and what you do.
Well, I mean, you hit on it here at the beginning. My motto is that all things are campy, kooky, glamorous, and spooky. And I think that really sums up what it is that I do with my presence online. I have two great loves in my life, and that is like vintage fashion / history, just anything old, and then anything spooky and, you know, just that gives you the eternal autumn vibes. And so it was my goal when I set out as Midge Munster online to hit this niche I wasn't really seeing, which was that place where vintage and Halloween came together. And as I'm sure we'll get into later, just also coming from a space of being a person who has previously been, I guess afraid isn't quite the right word, but just cautious to show up loudly in the world. And weirdly, the pandemic kind of freed me from a lot of those chains. And so part of my presence online too is just showing other people you can take the things you love, bring them loudly, let people know what you're about, and just like have fun. Life isn't that freaking serious.
And here, okay. Your host, folks, is a giant gay man, if you didn't know by now. And I'm
What?
And I'm here to tell you that, oh my gosh, the style and the hair.
Thank you.
Glorious hair. You are so beautiful. And so I mean, y'all,
you're gonna make me weep, Patrick.
I just love you. And I also wonder, sometimes I'm like, man, does she live with the photographer in her house? Because every post is so beautifully photographed too. How do you explain that?
Oh my gosh. Oh, I don't. Thank you. I actually am like kind of self-conscious about my photography skills, actually, because that's something I think that I don't. I wouldn't say like, wow, that's my strong suit. Now, I will say a lot of my photos that are like, you know, if you see photos of me outside or things like those, I did used to work with a photographer for a couple years. Jenna is her name, Jenna Patterson. She's incredible, Kansas City based. And her and I actually met. We went to high school together, and we weren't really like friends. We weren't close. I mean, I liked her. She was always very nice, but we didn't run in the same circles. And then years later, she reached out to me and she was like, hey, I think what you're doing is fun and cool, and I'm wanting to kind of expand my portfolio into doing more, you know, photographs for people who do content. Would you want to shoot together sometime? And actually, if you don't mind, I'll rant a little bit about this, because I credit Jenna really heavily with, I was somebody who didn't like to be photographed, actually. I didn't like seeing myself. And through working with her and taking photos, I think she taught me to see myself how other people see me. And like, I got to experience looking at my own joy for the first time in that way. And it was so transformative. And so a lot of those like really high quality photos you see of me are from working with Jenna. And that was just, yeah, I don't do it so much anymore. And not because I wouldn't love to. She had 2 babies along the way, and we just slowed down. We used to shoot once a month together, actually. It was like an all the time thing, and it was so fun. And we would always come with, you know, I'd come with some crazy idea. I'd be like, hey, Jenna, I want to be a witch in a village. And she would find a village for me, and we would go do, I was like, hey, I want to do Sleepy Hollow. And she'd be like, I'll find a cemetery. Like she was just on board with all the crazy crap I would bring to the table. That's going to sound so strange, but I highly recommend, if you're a person who's struggling with confidence, take 1,000 photos of yourself and just get used to what you look like and start finding the things you love about the way you show up. Because that was really freeing for me to start seeing myself through my content.
You know, I've alluded to the fact that the pandemic is really, if I'm not mistaken, kind of when Midge Munster was birthed, right?
Well, yes. Yes and no, but yes.
But what I was going to say is that when you cruise through your Instagram, for sure, there's not what I think is cool is even though you can kind of tell where Midge Munster really took off, you were just being yourself. There's not really a obvious line where, oh, now here is Midge Munster, the influencer. You know, you were just being you the whole time.
I was actually really adamant about that when I made kind of the shift into this vein that I didn't want to like start a fresh Instagram. I didn't want to delete the past of who I was. I didn't want to, you know, and so if we want to talk about the Midge origin story, so I've been on YouTube for going on 6 or 7 years now. And previously my channel was called Adventures in Vintage. And I only did kind of like vintage haul and pinup content and things. And I enjoyed the content making process, but I wasn't really having fun. And that part of me has, always been there. And I think, if you go really far back in my Instagram, that's kind of the me that you're seeing, which is there's truth in who that person was for me. But I started doing pinup competitions and I needed a stage name. And I went through a few for a while. I knew I wanted it to be a little bit spooky. Originally, I was going to be Katrina Von Casket, which I'm so glad that I didn't go with that. But
that would have been okay too.
Yeah, that's not bad. But I had this wild hair one day that I was like, Midge Munster, because Patrick, I don't even, you know this because we're Facebook friends. So my government name is not Midge or anything that could be confused for Midge. So basically that name came from a few things. Midge is Barbie's redheaded best friend. And I am certainly the redheaded best friend trope. And also Midge Maisel from Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, because I love that she's a comedian and that she's...
Awesome show.
Yeah, she's funny and she's fierce and she's who she is. And that's kind of who I wanted to show up as. And then obviously Munster from the Munsters. But I also wanted this character in my pinup competitions to be kind of the Marilyn Munster of like, she's only spooky if you look up close kind of thing. So I started showing up as Midge at pinup contests first, and not with really any intent of bringing that into my content. And then, here came COVID, and there was a trend going around the internet right at the top of the pandemic, like late March, early April, where people were doing that quarantine-a-ween trend, and you would make Halloween content from quarantine. And I've been a Halloween baby my whole life. And I was like, oh, that just sounds so nice right now. I just could really use that Halloween hit of serotonin and all this muck. And so I made a Halloween video on my Adventures in Vintage channel, kind of out of left field, thinking it would be really poorly received because that was not at all my audience at the time. And I had more fun making that video than I had making videos in 5 years. And something clicked in my brain and I thought this was what it was always supposed to be. I just didn't have the tools to get here yet. And so it was almost overnight that I shifted gears from Adventures in Vintage to Midge Munster. And it wasn't really a shift in how I was showing up or, it was a shift in what the content was subject matter wise, but not in the way it was presented, I guess is what I'm trying to say. It just rang more true to who I had been the whole time. And it took off almost immediately. And I still kind of feel like I'm waiting to wake up from this dream that I'm having.
Because you're able to do it full time. This is full time now.
Yes. So I quit my desk job it's been almost 2 years. I quit in July of 21, I believe. So it was about a year of, it's so funny because people who have only known me as Midge are like, wow, that happened overnight. And I'm like, yeah, but you didn't see the 5 years of just getting 100 views on a video and making like shouting into the void.
Yeah.
For 5 years before that. But no, in a sense, it did really happen very suddenly, and I'm very thankful. It happened so organically, though. At the same time, I don't feel like, you know, I blew up off of one post and then nothing ever happened again. I feel like I've cultivated this beautiful group of humans who show up, and it's just been really incredible.
And then suddenly you're being flown out to New Jersey to open the Spirit Halloween flagship store. I mean, what?
That was insane. That was insane. I'm still like, did that happen? That was actually what spurned the job quitting. I got that offer from Spirit to fly out there. I was in a nonprofit job, which if any of you have worked in nonprofit, you know, it's pretty... what's a good word for it?
Not lucrative?
Yeah, well, that and just like I lived and ate and breathed that job, and I wasn't given, you know, there was no space for me to do anything bigger than what I was already doing with my channel. And so I came home from work one day and I looked at my husband and I said, "Do you trust me?" And he said, yeah. Why?" And I said, "I'm thinking about doing something really crazy, but I need you to be all in with me and trust that I can do this." And he said, "Yeah." And we sat down that night and looked at, you know, our budget and figured out what the next few months were going to look like while I got on my feet. And I quit the next day and took the gig from Spirit. Went out to New Jersey. So cool, so fun, and a real like baptism by fire of going from, and not in a bad way, but just like going from corporate life to doing this like influencer thing.
Yeah.
It's so crazy. Like, had people waiting for me, and then they had all these gift boxes, and then they're like, "Oh, Midge, we got to get a picture of you over here, and Midge, come over here." It's like, what is going on?
And then you're like, "Hold on, pose."
Literally. Yeah. And I was like, "What? I'm just a ticket salesman from Kansas City."
So take us back to where this passion for Halloween and vintage Halloween and your style, where it comes from. Like, what does Halloween taste like and smell like to you?
I love that.
Yeah, like I'm so into nostalgia when it comes to Halloween. Take us back.
I love that question. Well, first and foremost, it's my mom and my dad. I always say my mom's birthday is a couple days before Halloween, and so it was always a big deal in our house because there was just a natural celebratory nature in the air around that time of year because of her birthday. But she's an autumn girly, and I am too. And I'm a September baby, so we're both just like very like fall, yay. As most, I think a lot of women from the Midwest are also just like, fall is fun time. My parents also, so I'm adopted, and so I'm a child of older parents for someone my age. My friends, you know, their parents were in their early 30s when my parents were in their 50s. And now my parents are, you know, going on 70. But I'm so thankful for that because they introduced me to so many things that people my age didn't know. You know, I learned about really good music and really good films, and I just fell in love with things that were so far before my time. And that feels like home to me now because it's also connected to my relationship to my parents, who I love very much. And I grew up in a mid-century ranch, a home that was built in 1954. It's the cutest little house on the planet. And so I fell in love with these old things, and, you know, the Halloween thing just, I don't know, it came naturally. I was a theatrical kid. I was very imaginative. I loved dressing up in costume. I loved playing pretend. And I mean, I'm sure, Patrick, you're not unfamiliar with the phrase that Halloween is like gay Christmas.
Yes.
And
I think it's official somewhere.
Yeah, I think we have that. That's on our agenda, right? that they keep talking about. Yeah. So yeah, I loved the costumes. I loved the smell in the air and the time of year. I mean, here, I'm sure so for those of you who might not know this, Patrick and I actually live very close to each other. We're not far at all. And do you feel like autumn is just a lot hotter than it used to be?
Yes. And it hits later than it used to.
So much later. Because, so my birthday's September 8th. It used to be that it was like properly fall on my birthday. We would go for hay rides and apple picking, and it was cool, and I was wearing sweaters. And now it's still Satan's crack by the time my birthday rolls around, and it's humid and I'm pissed.
Oh, that's such a good way to put it. My dad used to always talk about how you knew it was time to go back to school in September.
Yeah.
Because that's when we lived across from a cornfield. That's when the tops of the corn was brown.
Yeah.
And so now, and I didn't grow up going to school in air conditioning. We very much did not have air conditioning in Missouri. So it was hot and miserable, but the purpose of summer was so that you didn't go to school in the hot summer months. And now when school is starting, the corn is still green, first of all.
Well, yeah, and they're starting earlier and earlier, so it's like the pit of August.
Yeah, and it's like, I hate the heat just finally gets to its peak, and so fall is it is weird. It is different now, and it hits later, and there are some nights on Halloween where we've, sat in our driveway for trick-or-treating doing our shtick, and I'm out there with shorts and a t-shirt and, some mixed cold beverage because I'm sweating and I'm like, oh.
And then 2 years ago, it snowed on Halloween. So the Midwest, y'all, are we selling it to you? Do you want to move here?
But visually, maybe it might not always be right at Halloween. Visually, it's my jam,
Yeah, and that's where I stemmed from when I got on this tangent. Yeah, back when I was a kid, and still now, the Midwest in the fall is stunning, absolutely stunning. You can't not be excited about it. It's vibrant and orange, and everything's just crisp and bright. It's beautiful. And I honestly think that's why I have red hair. I love the color of the fall. I wanted to just grab it and put it on my head. But yeah, I've always loved it. And I'm so glad. I think so much of, I don't want to ruminate on the pandemic, but it's had such a massive impact on all of us as people. I feel like part of that time frame and part of healing through that was just returning to things we loved as children.
For real.
And for me, that was Halloween. Yeah.
You and I both know so many Halloween creators in the West Coast, in California. And you just went to the big
MidSummer Scream. And it's
they do up Halloween so well. And I'm like, where do you get the references to all the crunchy, and how do you get into the Halloween spirit without fall, because you don't really truly have fall, but they figure it out.
I'm so envious of the opportunities they have there, as far as just there's so many events and things that happen that are Halloween centric out there. But I don't know that I could ever live somewhere without the seasons. I'm honestly a winter girly too. I love not so much Christmas, but I love winter. I like snow. I love fall. Summer can suck my butt, but
I love bundling with my hot beverages.
Yes, I'm a bundler, but not progressive, just not bundling home and auto, but I am bundling up in sweaters. Absolutely.
So one of the more recent things that you did that was so delicious that I was sucked into was your Coffin Table.
Yes.
And I shared it all over my social media, so I'm sure that some of you have already checked out the Coffin Table. But I think that would be a good example of kind of one of your bigger projects that you've done. You want to talk about the coffin table a little bit?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm also a fan of the coffin table. That's one of my favorite things I've done in recent times here. So yeah, I mean, I guess if you're not familiar with what we're talking about, I purchased a Victorian era coffin from the late 1800s, a youth-sized coffin that had not been used. And we go over in the video what signs are there that coffin has not been used. But
not that you wouldn't have still used it if it was.
Well, certainly, yeah. Yeah. I would have. I don't know if Taylor would let me bring it in the house. It already took quite a bit of convincing with the unused coffin. But I just fell in love with it. I saw it in an antique mall, and I thought, that is just the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. I was so drawn to the wood finish and things. And immediately my brain was like, what the hell would I do with a coffin? And then being the person that I am, my brain immediately said, well, put it on legs and put it in the middle of your living room. And I did. So yeah, I popped some hairpin legs on it to give it that nice mid-century vibe and put some hinges on it so it still opens and works. I just love it. I think it's gorgeous, and I've actually designed my whole living room around it now. And in the process of,
are we going to have an unveiling of the whole thing?
Yes, so I will eventually do the whole room on the channel and share that process as well. And I'm very excited about that. I will never lose my mid-century love. That will never happen. But I am also starting to lean more into some of these more less simple forms of decor, these more elaborate kind of Victorian-esque.
Like a coffin.
like a coffin. Well, what's really funny is actually, Patrick, as you and I speak here, I am working on a second coffin project that will be going live tomorrow when we're recording this. So it'll be well out by the time y'all are listening. Definitely go check that out too.
Yeah.
But it's the polar opposite of the coffin table. We're going very campy coffin rather than spooky historical coffin. I posted something about it on my Patreon. I was like, how many coffin projects in 1 year is too many coffin projects? Asking for a friend.
And how many coffins can one person have in their house after 10 years of doing 2 coffins a year?
Coffin math. If Midge leaves the antique mall going 18 miles an hour with 4 coffins, how quickly will it take her husband to file for divorce?
That's funny, because I was just going to tell you, when I was watching all of that, I was like, okay, so where am I going to get a coffin? And then I was like,
the number of people, and I was so nervous about uploading that video because it was a little off color from my normal content.
Uh-huh.
And I thought like, oh, people are not going to resonate with this. They're going to think it's really morbid and weird. And it was so well received. And every other comment was like, well, looking for a coffin now. And I was like, I'm so thrilled that I have curated my audience in such a way that
they resonate with you so much.
Exactly my brand of weirdo. Yeah. Like to the point where people, like I buy stock in antique coffins, y'all, because I've just bumped the market.
And it's unrelated, but I almost peed in that video where you randomly just started talking to the birds in your fireplace.
I thought you were going to say when I put those giant ass legs on there and flipped it over. My ADHD is a hell of a drug.
Uh-huh.
Like my spatial awareness is non-existent. But yeah, no, the birds have been in my fireplace for about a year. I'm going to go on a tangent. Why not?
Do it.
People may know if they watch my channel, I have a pair of neighbors on one side that do not care for me whatsoever. They, I think, are pretty strongly faith-based people, which is absolutely fine, but they seem to have take issue with my general way of being. And of course, they've, watched me carry coffins into my home and all kinds of crazy stuff. But I'll say things like, yeah, I have these neighbors that think I'm a witch. And people will be like, think you're a witch? And I'm like, well, okay. And so I was talking about the bird, all the birds in the neighborhood have taken nest in my home. Like I have birds in my fireplace. I have birds in my grill. I have birds just everywhere. And every time you drive up to my house on the block, it's like I'm in suburbia, it's all these little houses. And then for some reason at my house, there's always just birds.
How do you declare yourself a witch without really declaring?
I was like, I'm the house that kids walk by probably are like, don't ring that doorbell. That's where the witch lives. It's the bird house. Like, literally, I'm giving Alfred Hitchcock couture over here. All my birds.
Oh my gosh.
But yeah, so I have to interview them on the channel, give them a platform,
Yeah, it was a funny moment. I remember I watched that part twice. I was like, oh my God, that's funny.
I love my bird friends.
And so I actually didn't know this until late last night before our interview. Midge decided to give me a little taste of some things we could talk about. And I didn't realize that, I would have asked you at some point, but I didn't realize that you do have spiritual gifts.
Yeah.
And have had a ghost experience. So I don't know which one you want to talk about first, but we obviously have to dig into this.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know which to start with. I guess maybe ghost encounter.
Okay.
Because I think it leads into kind of some more stuff. So this was in 2014 or 13. And this was kind of, so, when people ask you if you believe in ghosts and you're like, sure, yeah, I was that person. I was never a non-believer. I've never been a skeptic because of what, we'll get into this, but I do have some woo-woo nature and some spiritual gifts that have always made me think just more, energy can't be created or destroyed.
Right.
I feel energies all the time. I know there are things bigger than my comprehension. So I've never been a skeptic. I've definitely been like, yeah, probably. that makes sense that there would be a ghost. But then this experience was what took me from like, sure, yeah, to like, yes, I believe in ghosts. They're very real and I've been touched by one. So I was in college. I was doing a stint abroad in Scotland, which, wow, first of all, Scotland, holy heck. And that was my first time ever leaving the United States. And so even just, being somewhere with such rich history that is so much older than anything we can imagine here, already I was like feeling the energies that be of like, wow, this place has heft, there's stuff here. But my friend Sarah wanted to go on a ghost tour, and that wasn't really my bag, quite frankly. Like I'm kind of a scaredy cat, actually. Like not so much now, but in my past, I was freaked out by friggin' everything. So I was like, ooh, ghost tour in a city I've never been to. I don't know about that. So of course I went, and I was like, well, I'm not gonna let you leave me in the dorm by myself. So yeah. But it was this underground ghost tour of like under the streets of Edinburgh.
Yeah.
Which if you go to Edinburgh, I highly, highly recommend you take this tour. It was awesome. Our host's name was Darren, and he had on lots of eyeliner. He was very, very fun and spooky. But yeah, they take you under the streets, and it's very just fascinating history. And also, because of how history works, it's also very sad because a lot of just horrible things happened to people because it was olden times. And we are walking down different hallways, and he's like, oh, over there, sometimes people see the ghost of a watchman, blah, blah, blah. They're giving you the story. They're spinning the web. And in those instances, I tend to not believe my instincts because I'm very easily persuaded. Like, if you tell me there's a ghost there, I'm like, okay, sure. Like, yeah, sounds good. I'm not going to go over there then. So, all these other spaces had kind of been prefaced with stories. And then we go into this cavern type thing, like a room, but it's heavy room, stone, like wall to, we're under the street, so obviously it's wall to wall stone, but it had a like gravitas about it that I was like, whoo, immediately. And I'm very sensitive to those things from the get-go. And he has us all like kind of stand in a circle around the room, and he's in the middle of the circle with a lantern, just like kind of talking about history of, I might not be getting all the details correct because this was many years ago, but my understanding was basically that they had built out some tunnels to store people in because they were like burning the streets to get rid of germs and plague and, you know, poop in the streets and things.
Pretty much.
Yeah. So they had put all these people underground in basically stone ovens and then lit the street on fire above them, and people like cooked alive under the streets, which is just incredibly heavy anyway. And I was like, well, that's definitely the energy I'm feeling. And I wouldn't have believed it otherwise because I was kind of, you know, getting in my own head of like, wow, that's really horrible and sad. At the exact same moment, a person standing next to me who I didn't know from Adam, we both felt little hands on like the back of our leg, just kind of like grab, like tug almost. And at the same moment, this person and I both like jerked and went, whoa. And because she could corroborate this story with me, she's like, did you feel that? And I was like, yeah, did you? Like, it, you know, and we both had felt the exact same thing. And then Darren is like, oh, yeah. He's so casual. He's like, oh, yeah, there's like a little girl that people see in the corner of that room all the time where you guys are standing. And I was like, okay, well.
Neat.
Yeah, perfect. And I can't explain. And that's the I'm sure you guys go over that here all the time. Like, that's the frustrating thing is like, there's no physical proof. I can't show you what I experienced. I can't quantify it in any way. But it felt so incredibly real. Like that there was no doubt in my mind. I was like, okay, yeah, there's something here. And there's energy and things that can manipulate in the real world in a way we don't understand. And yeah, now, honestly, in the last couple of years, I've been really, really, really wanting to try to like actively seek out spirits.
Yay!
Shall I transition into my weird stuff?
Let's do it.
So like I said, I'm a HSP, highly sensitive person. I've always been like very highly aware of energy. And as long as I can remember, I have seen auras around people. And it's kind of like one of those things like, okay, like we both wear glasses. I was born without good vision, so I don't know what good vision is. Like, you know, like I don't know what it looks like until somebody puts glasses on me and I'm like, oh, that's what that's supposed to look like? That's kind of how auras were for me. People were like, whoa, wasn't that crazy? And I was like, I didn't realize that other people didn't see them forever until I like said something to my mom when I was, I don't know, like 5 or 6 about the colors on the people. And she was like, what? And I was like, oh, okay, I guess that's not a thing. So that's a very cool thing. And actually, as I mentioned before, that I am adopted, I found out years later, like only a couple years ago, I have 2 full-blood siblings who also see them, which is interesting. And like, I want science to intervene and be like, is this a inherited thing? Like what? So that's really fascinating to me.
But definitely put some stock into the fact that you're really experiencing it when you find out.
Exactly. Yeah. It did feel, validating.
Validation, yeah.
Yeah, when, because I now have some contact with my biological sister, and I had posted something randomly one time on Instagram about seeing auras, and she was like, oh my God, we see them too. And I was like, oh, like it, even though I knew what I was seeing, it felt so like, validating to just be like, okay, this is really a thing. So that has always made me just hyper in tune to energy. Like I can see minuscule shifts in people's moods. I can see, I have told people they were pregnant before they knew they were pregnant. I can see when people are sick, like a lot, it's very telling. It has a lot of information intake for me. And Then moving forward, I started having a lot of like prophetic dreams where I would have these insane dreams that feel completely different from a normal dream. And I've always been a vivid dreamer anyway, but these dreams feel what I can only imagine like astral projection would feel like. Like it feels like I'm in the moment. Like I can feel it, I can taste it, I can touch it.
Right.
I'll give a quick example. I had a dream a few years ago that my best friend, her grandmother passed, and that her grandfather had been like, hey, I want you to have this mirror. And in the dream, I like helped her load the mirror into a car, and I saw it in the dream. It was this very ornate wooden carved mirror, and it had a hummingbird etched in the glass. And I told her about it the next day, and she's like, oh, that's so funny. My grandpa collects hummingbirds. And I was like, oh, haha. And we like didn't think anything more about it. And then a couple days later, we're at her mom's house, and I've known her mom my whole life, and we're really close. She's like a second mom to me. So I'm like she's like, tell mom about the dream. And I was like, oh my God, Brooke, this was so crazy. So I'm like telling her, and she's standing across the kitchen back to me chopping potatoes. And as I'm describing the mirror, she stops and she turns around and she just stares at me. And I was like, what? She said, how do you know about that mirror?
Oh my God.
And I was like, I was in my dream. And she was like, that mirror has been in my family for generations. It's in a storage unit in Harrisonville. So I've never seen it. It's been in storage like the whole time I've known her. So there's no possible way. And I've never, like Rain didn't even know about it. My best friend didn't even know about it. So she like wouldn't have ever told me. So it just crazy. And then like, yeah, she shows me and it's literally a verbatim picture of what was in my brain.
Well, was that able to give any, I don't know, like closure or anything to that family?
Well, the interesting thing is, her grandmother is still with us. So we'll see.
Oh,
we'll see what happens. But her grandmother is unfortunately been declining over the last couple months. So, but that one was more like just a moment where I was like, okay, so I have some kind of like sight gift, right? And then I had one just when I was in Salem. You probably watched my Salem vlog.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, y'all. She has great coverage of her trip to Salem. And if you want to just send her millions of dollars so she can just travel the world and do videos.
Oh, I love making travel vlogs. I would love to cover spooky travel. If you're planning a trip to Salem, I not to toot my own horn, but I think it's a pretty good comprehensive guide of like, especially if you're a spooky traveler, the things you'll want to hit while you're there. Definitely check that out. But
because part of me was like, well, man, I just made my trip to Salem not long before that. Now I want to go back and do it right.
I want to go back. And I did it and I still want to go back. But while I was there, I had a Reiki session that was really awesome and powerful. And the night after I had that, I had a dream about my friend that basically in the waking world, he had been offered this contract on a cruise ship and he was feeling kind of trepidatious about whether or not he wanted to go. And so I had a dream that night that he had turned down that contract and that he had received another contract offer the next day for more money. And he called me the next morning and was like, I'm just feeling really like, I don't know. I don't feel like this is the right thing for me. And I was like, well, for what it's worth, here's a dream I had. Take it or leave it. Probably no stock in it. So that afternoon, he turned down the contract. And the next day got a call from another cruise line that I didn't even know he had auditioned for. And they called him and offered him a better contract for his own show in the state. Like it was, and he texted me. He's like, okay, are you a witch? I was like, I don't know. Like things like that happen all the time where I have these very specific dreams. And point being, circling back to the ghost thing, I think I definitely have and I have lots of dreams where people who have passed visit me and it feels very visceral and I feel like I get information from them. And so I'm now kind of in a place where I'm trying to figure out how do these energetic gifts connect to possibly a way to communicate with people who are no longer here. Because I think if I could train myself and really learn how to use my gifts, that there may be a way to use them in a I hate the term ghost hunting. I don't know.
It bugs a lot of people. It's always bugged me too, but
yeah,
I get what you're saying.
Yeah, and a communication sense with spirits.
Which is funny because that was going to be my next question, because I was like, clearly you are being more receptive in recent years and open to it.
Mm-hmm.
And while I've wanted to be a witch forever and wanted to have these abilities forever, and I just don't have them. I've tried, but everything I've seen and from people I've interviewed and known and talked to is the more you practice those things is that they're going to grow.
Yep. And I think, honestly, that's probably why it's just now starting to take off, is because I have, and like I said, I was a scaredy cat. So like even good spirits, I like have this kind of caution where I'm like, do I want to allow this information to enter my space? Because I think once you kind of open that tap, you can't really turn it off. And I think I was really afraid of that in a lot of ways. And now I don't feel that way. Now I feel like it is a gift. And if I have a way to use it in a way that's helpful, either to the spirits or to people left here without answers, I would love to, kind of maybe try my hand at mediumship, I guess.
Oh, that's awesome. I have had some people offer up the opportunity to like give readings for practice before.
Yeah.
And kind of hang a flag in our group, our Big Seance Parlor Facebook group, and have now kind of grown by doing that as practice. And
that's awesome.
Kind of giving to others at the same time. I also wanted to tell you that I've told this story multiple times now, but I have had over the years a couple of students, both girls,
mm-hmm.
in middle school as a teacher, who came up to me with some kind of like, they either see things or have experienced things. And it's always like a real quiet type of thing. And one of them, this story that about auras,
mm-hmm.
I didn't even have my podcast or really was even blogging at the time. So it had to have just been something that this young lady, I guess, trusted me or felt that I was the right kind of nerd. And she came up to me and told me, she said, I see auras.
Yeah.
But she was kind of bashful about it, but she just kind of wanted me to know and wanted to tell me. And what she didn't plan on was me getting so excited by that.
Yeah.
But also like paranoid by that, because I'm like, oh God, as a teacher, we all don't have good days, some bad days.
Yeah.
I'm like, does she know when I've got my funky aura or when I'm, just aggravated, or I'm like, oh great, now she sees all the colors or whatever.
And honestly, it's not something I openly share with a lot of people for that reason, because people do feel almost very defensive at times, especially people who are more guarded and don't like to be perceived in an intimate way by people. It can be really uncomfortable for them to know that, because it does feel strange. It's like I'm gaining access to information you didn't consent for me to have, almost. And so I try to be cognizant of that and not overread into people's stuff when I'm not familiar with that person. But even just like, I think it gives me an upper hand in just situations.
Social.
Yeah. And I can see when people have bad intentions. I can see it coming, and I just don't even mess with that.
Jealous of that. But no, I got in trouble by, I didn't tell any other kids,
mm-hmm.
but some of the teachers around. I was like, dude, come here.
Yeah.
And I'd have her, I'm like, do you know that she's got this cool ability? And there was one day where she was like, Mr. Color. Like giving me the, I didn't want you to tell people. And I'm like, oh God, I'm so sorry. So I forget your name, young lady. I'm sure you're like 30 now, but I do apologize if you're listening. I told your secret and was so excited about it. So I did learn a lesson with that. Like, when they tell you cool things like that, it's not necessarily something they want on a billboard, Mr. Keller.
It's wonderful that, especially if she, has that gift, that she saw something in you that she knew she could tell you that, and that you wouldn't be mean or cruel about it.
Or at least think she was weird or.
Right. And so it is like, I don't know, it's both a gift and like it can be a curse, because a lot of people are very uncomfortable with it and either don't like it or don't believe you.
Well, especially in middle school. I mean, who hasn't blocked part of their middle school out?
middle school. I don't.
What is
I don't
that?
think I didn't do that. No, I don't think so.
Just skipped it.
Yeah.
Just skipped it.
Yeah, I don't think I ever did that.
We are going to talk about where people can find you. If you know of things that are coming up, like more coffin content. But before all of that, I have one more really super weird question.
I love a super weird question.
Oh, well, be ready. Here we go.
Okay.
And I did give you a little sneak peek into this question coming up, but I love that you are a woman who claims her space, a queer woman who claims her space and works her passion and gives no shits. And I think that's something that you've grown into. And
absolutely,
it gives me, a middle-aged gay man, confidence just by watching you and being inspired by that kind of confidence that you have. And so I wondered if between that and your passion and creativity, if you could give us a quick, TED talk on how to do that.
Well, first of all, thank you for your kindness. I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting because, and I talk about this online a lot too, that I have kind of become this person who, gives other people that space to claim themselves in that way. But I struggle with it too, still. And even though I've come into it a lot, I still have bad days,
Of course.
But I think giving yourself the permission to just, I know it sounds so simple, like just to be who you are is, and I'm talking about actually not just like, being like, okay, I'm going to do it, but I'm talking about really like sitting with yourself, looking yourself in the mirror and setting the intention of like right now from this moment, I am no longer beholden to anybody else's expectations of who they think I should be. And that, again, I bring it back to this, we were all quarantined and I had this real reckoning with myself sitting at home alone thinking how much of a performance I put on for everybody outside those four walls every day and the masks that I was putting on to make other people comfortable and by proxy making myself very uncomfortable. And I didn't want to do it anymore because that whole situation, it really showed us all how everything can go away in the snap of a finger. And I didn't want to waste another second of my life living in a way that was untrue to how I felt, really. And like you said, I really came into it kind of strong and hard. I went from, wearing very like corporate clothing and had my natural brown hair and which sounds like silly cosmetic things, but it's not. It was about claiming who I had always been on the inside, on the outside, and showing it to the world in a way that was unashamed.
Word.
And yeah, I got my first, I had wanted a tattoo my entire life and I didn't get one because my parents hated them. And I got one and then I got 5 and I coated my skin with things that show people who I am and what I love. And I came out to my parents, which was a huge deal. I've known I was queer since I was 10 years old, and most of my friends and people knew, but I had never told my family. And once I married my partner and he was a cis man, I just kind of was like, well, I guess that's that. I don't have to ever tell them. And you say, I give you like this confidence as a middle-aged gay man, but like, it's because of people like you and others who came before me that I am able to now stand in my truth in that way and really own it. And I'm so thankful that I live in a time now where I can say like, I am queer and it's valid, even though I'm in this relationship that I am in. And, like I was talking to somebody the other day, we were talking about like, there's this thing that happens when you come out and then you just slowly get gayer and gayer. And I'm not talking like in pursuit of people. I'm talking like in cultural stance. Like you just get louder and brighter and more powerful by the day. You really do. And I attribute a lot of my growth to my queerness and owning it as a woman and, feeling like because I also think being queer is kind of like living outside the matrix a little bit. Like you don't see the world in the same way. And I think that is our greatest superpower. I really do. And I didn't mean to turn this into a TED Talk on queerness, but I love queer people. And if you are listening to this and you're a queer person, own it and shine bright, because we queer people are going to save the world. I really believe that. But yeah, I just think that any part of yourself that feels true and honest when you are sitting by yourself in your room is exactly what you should be giving and gifting. It's a gift to share that with people. They should be so privileged to see the most true form of yourself, and no one else is exactly like you. So why would you try to be like other people when you have this gift of being exactly who you are? Own it, show the world. And if anybody has anything to say, crow caw, fuck them. Them, yeah. I'm just, it's that old adage of like, anybody who matters won't mind, and anybody who minds doesn't matter. And I will say one thing I tell people, because I get a lot of questions about like, how did you start dressing the way you do? And how did you find the confidence to like, go out looking like that? And what I tell people, and I mean this with 100% honesty, 99.99999% of the interactions that I have are gorgeous. People are so excited and receptive to people who are unafraid to be different. And it's not about, it's about how you carry it. It really is. And if you go out into the world showing your colors and you shrink yourself, people are going to meet you with that energy because they are reading that you're uncomfortable or that you're ashamed. I just go with it and say, this is who I am, and I'm sorry if you don't like it. And most people do like it, and that's great. And the ones who don't even have the confidence most of the time to tell me they don't like it. So
that's the exact TED Talk it needed to be. And it made me think of, when you were explaining that toward the end, it made me think of, and I'm not looking at it right now, but I remember seeing it at some point in the last couple of years. You were posing in front of a marquee at a theater,
okay,
or something, and there's people around you, at just kind of being people around you, and you are just so comfortably, dramatically posed for this photo in your lovely outfit and the hair, and you are Midge Munster in that pose. And I am like, I am loving that she gives no shits right now.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. I love it.
Yeah, it did. It happened at some point. It went from like not caring a little bit to full, what probably looks like full delusion and lunacy from the outside, but I don't care. I'm happy, man. And that's the best thing is that, and we didn't even touch on this, and I won't get into it, but like I've struggled with mental illness my entire life, and now kind of from where I'm standing, yeah, those things are very legitimate and real, and they affect me still. But how many of us are actually like struggling with these issues just because of the boxes that everyone is trying to put us in, and we're not built to function that way? And I have experienced more joy and happiness and friendship and excitement and just beauty in my life in the last 2 years, specifically when I finally pulled the ripcord and said, I'm going all in, than I did in the first 28 years of my life.
Do you hear from younger, and it doesn't even have to be younger, but followers of yours about how you presenting yourself to the world has affected them?
Me trying not to cry. Yes. And that is honestly the best freaking gift that this has given me, that beyond the content and the fun and the creation and everything. So many plus size women tell me that they feel like they can take up space. A lot of queer women that, didn't feel like they could own that part of themselves because they were in a cis het presenting relationship or what have you, now know that they can claim that part of themselves. And I'm not doing anything revolutionary, right? Like I'm not being like, wow, I made this amazing thing for people. It's just so exciting because I get to be that person for somebody, and I have those people that were those people for me.
But it is revolutionary for those people.
Right. You know? Well, and it's this beautiful chain reaction, I think is what I mean to say, that like I had those people that gave me permission, that I saw and I was like, okay, that person, honestly, let's shout her out. Miranda Enzor of Spooky Little Halloween was a person who I saw and I was like, look at this tall, beautiful woman with pink hair. And she's mature. Like she's 10 years my senior and still looks like in the best way. That looks like a beautiful like kid, just owning her like fun. I think like so many of my friends now that are older, they're older than me, which is amazing because like I was convinced as a child that you got old and you just stopped having fun. Like that was kind of the template I was shown, that like you stopped doing things for yourself. You stopped enjoying things. You just like got old and you started dressing like an old woman and then you died.
And life had to be boring after that.
And life had to be, uninteresting. And now like I see people like Miranda or like you or my friend, like Devin and Andrew at Your Best Halloween Ever. All these people who are, like I said, not old at all, but older than myself, who are still like just living these big, full, beautiful, exciting lives. And I see the possibilities. And then I, in turn, get to then show that to my people and they get to go then show that to their people. And it's just, I hope that as we all kind of, I call it waking up. I think we're all starting to wake up a little bit. And I think I hope as that continues that we'll just see a deconstruction of these silly late stage capitalism ideals that we've been taught, and that we can all just be exactly who we are and share our gifts with each other.
Well, we're so proud of you, young lady. No, that shout out was for Miranda at Spooky Little Halloween, who has also been on the show. So you can go back and find that episode. But no, I love that. I think that's beautiful. And I don't know, I think you've done an amazing job. We also want to shout out your friend Penny Snark, because you all have a fabulous podcast that I've been listening and binging to. So
yes,
you recorded today, actually. So
we did. And I will say, as far as what's coming up, we are coming up on our 100th episode here in about a month, which is absolutely crazy to me that we've been doing this for 2 years now. I don't know how that happened.
Did I say the name of it? It's the Ghouls Night In podcast.
Yes, Ghouls Night In with Penny Snark and Midge Munster. We talk about spooky history. We talk about weird fears. We just, it's very educational. So if you like weird history and spooky stuff, come give us a listen. We're going to do a live for that 100th episode, which will be really fun. And I don't know, I think we're going to try to maybe do some in-person stuff too. She's in Milwaukee and I'm in KC, so we do this from afar typically, but I think we might try to get in person and do some fun stuff. And then as far as I go, I've got lots of really great, exciting content coming up for the Halloween season. I am doing a Sleepy Hollow haunt in my front yard. It's my first like walk-through haunt ever. So in my yard, I mean, that makes it sound really grand scale. It's not that crazy, but
you'll work up to it.
I'll work. Yeah. I'm making a lot of cool props. That's all coming to the channel soon. Like I mentioned, I got another coffin project. So if you're a coffin ghoulie, come on by. And yeah, I mean, I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. Oh, and I will plug too. I just wrote a foreword for
that's right.
Andrew at Your Best Halloween Ever. He has a new book that just released yesterday. 13 More Tales for Halloween by Andrew Noles. And I wrote the foreword for that book. So if you'd like to read some spooky stories and another little TED Talk by me in the front of that book, you can check that out on Amazon. And I think that's kind of what I got going on.
I wanted to make sure that we talk about your handles, and these will be in the show notes too. But Midge Munster can be found at, first of all, midgemunster.com. I always like an old school website. You know, that's still important.
Yeah, please go look at it because I spent a lot of money on it. So go look at how pretty it is.
Not cheap to have a really good looking website. I know that.
Yeah.
But basically everything, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, is Midge Munster.
Yes. You can find me all over Midge Munster. And if you're looking for the podcast, we are at Ghouls Night In Pod on Instagram.
Excellent. You are fabulous, and I want to thank you for your time and your energy, because you've given me quite a bit of time today. And if you have any final thoughts, you can give it. Otherwise, you rock.
No, it's been a pleasure, and I appreciate you just asking me to come by.
For show notes, including links to anything we may have mentioned in this episode, visit bigseance.com. And you can continue the discussion and hang out with a great community of Paranerds by joining us in the Big Seance Parlor on Facebook. Want to hear your voice in a future episode? Go to bigseance.com/feedback to learn how. Thank you so much for listening. Unfortunately, it's time to blow the candles out, but we'll see you and light them again next time.
I keep having moments where I'm like, did I answer your question?
No, and you know...
No, you didn't.
No, even... That's not what I meant. But no, even
hilarious
if you don't...
timing, though.
Thank you to the following super Paranerds who support the show at patreon.com/Big Seance. Michael Henson, Daryl, Anne-Marie Sullivan, Natalie N., Kim Robb, Josiel Lorenzo, and Susan Davey. My supporters at the Parlor guest level, who can be found at bigseance.com/Parlor guests, are Allie of Hocus Pocus Collector, Ann Rekovich from OzParatech.com, Dina DeCastro of Dina DeCastro Astrology, Janae Michaels from Grey House Tarot and Farm Artifacts, Amy Park Gedicke of amyparkg.com, Lonnie Scott from WeirdWebRadio.com, Lana and John of Carbon Lilies, Tracy King, Andrew Watson, Jean Marie, Christine Rath Selhe, Mindy Kentop, Hope Battaglia, Casson Bailey, Melissa Armour, Sue, Diane Rax, Peggy Hagan, Bruce Williams, Christopher Kohler, and Jim Budd. And I currently have 5 awesome listeners who support the show at the $10 level. You've heard their names before, but you know, this $10 level thing isn't even official, so it's kind of cool. Those awesome Paranerds are Glenna Becker, Steve Skinner, James Wilfong, and Norman and Linda Keller. And I know you were blown away last week by Jean Marie's pledge of $15 a month, but she has since upped that pledge to $20. Thank you, Jean Marie. And thank you, Paranerds.